Hey guys, it's Karen, and I am back with another very special guest. This is Merisa, and she is going to chat with us a little bit about diet culture. The word diet is just very, for some, it's very scary, it's overwhelming. There's just so many feelings that go along with the word diet. So before we really jump into that, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got into this.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. My name is Merisa Martinez. I am a registered dietitian and I have had a private practice now for about 2 years. And kind of going back, in college, I really didn't know what I wanted to specialize in. I have kind of always in my entire life have been surrounded around people, family that have always dieted. And it's always been on my mind to learn more about nutrition, more about your body and how nutrition plays such a big factor. And when I was in college, I decided I wanted to learn more. I kind of struggled as well with binge eating disorder growing up, where I would diet, count calories. And, the word diet for everybody means something different. To me personally, when I hear the word diet, I hear restricting or maybe calorie counting, carb counting, things like that. And in my case, it was calorie counting. So growing up, my father always told me, to be on a diet, you had to eat 500 calories. And my grandma actually told me the same thing. She's like, sweetheart, I grew up dieting. There'd be times where I got to eat everything I wanted, but then I would go on these periods of time where I would only eat 500 calories. So that's just kind of what I was taught. And as I got older, I realized that that was not healthy. Starving yourself to, look a certain way or to lose weight. And I decided to take it a step further and learn more about nutrition and the nutrients that you find in food, fruits, vegetables, protein, and why it's so important to actually eat those foods. And after I after I finished my master's degree and became a registered dietitian, I decided I wanted to specialize more in eating disorders because it's something that I was familiar with. It's something that I saw a lot in our culture, is where, and it's happening in younger generations now, even more and more, where teenagers are, restricting more. And I decided to dive a little bit deeper and specialize in intuitive eating, which I'll talk a little bit more about here in a little bit, and help those that are struggling with binge eating disorder, anorexia, maybe those that are struggling with purging or negative body images and things like that.
Um, uh, I was flabbergasted there for a minute. There was so much you were saying. I was like, okay, I want to touch on all of that. So you are slightly younger. Okay, you're a lot younger than me, but I can tell you, growing up and somebody that is a, Generation X, I always remember, seeing articles in Cosmo. We would have Cosmo in high school, which I think is very weird now that I look back at it. Reading articles in Cosmo about 1,200 calories, or even my mom's like Good Housekeeping magazines. I remember the very skinny girls in 17. That was one of my favorite magazines. Sassy, even Sassy, who was a magazine that was supposed to be kind of cutting edge and bringing in that, new raw look. They were still very thin, and it still talked about, how to be thin, not really how to be healthy. And I can tell you, I say my mother is, she's Oprah's long lost sister, because she has done that whole thing of being very large and then being very tiny and being very large and being very tiny. And she's done every diet there was. There's always been some kind of restriction or diet or food being in the forefront. Good food, bad food. I remember my parents, like, we went through this whole time where we didn't eat dinners and we just had smoothies. And I was like, this is weird. So I think this is very common for a lot of women my age. And obviously we kind of have that, we have that split. We have the ones that just never got past it and have kept that cycle going in their own life. Or we've gone the other way where they're like, I'm not going to do this to my kids. And now we have this generation of snackers I am 100% guilty. My kids are grazers because I didn't want to restrict them. So it's really finding, that healthy boundaries of really what can I put together, and that's, I think, is where intuitive eating really goes in. And like you said, we'll get into that. But what are some of the common things that you see? Because I do feel like a lot of my girlfriends, without saying it, have food related issues, whether it's just, I shouldn't have the bread basket on the table, or I shouldn't have this second margarita, or whatever it is, to the ones that are very extreme and maybe do things that they don't want to talk about openly. So what are some of the common things that you see among women?
So you mentioned a lot of great things. And when you say no bread, no alcohol, that kind of goes back into the restrictive mindset. And one thing that I have seen that helps a lot of people, even children, is having a wide variety of fruit and vegetables available to you at the dinner table. Or in my house, we keep fresh fruit on the counter and on the table, because how many times do you walk in the kitchen a day?
Right.
5, 10 times a day. So just being able to see a variety of color as well. So apples and bananas and strawberries, things like that out on the counter. I'll cut watermelon sometimes, leave it out on the counter for 45 minutes to an hour, because I know I'm going to, or my son will walk into the kitchen and see it. And, with intuitive eating, so that is really just training your body to listen to your hunger cues. So it kind of goes on a scale through 1 through 10, with 10 being, you're extremely full. Maybe you overate on that bread basket, or all of those extra dishes on Thanksgiving, and you're just miserably full. You feel like taking a nap, or you're physically sick.
Right.
And, you really want to stay between that 5 and that 7 throughout the entire day. And that's something that really helps a lot of people with, just eating in general. Instead of restricting yourself, just trying to stay between that 5 and 7, which is the comfort level where you're feeling your best throughout the entire day. And it seems to help a lot of individuals. And one thing that I see common too is eating everything on your plate.
Oh,
So we're
yes.
kind of taught
Yes.
to, like, you can't leave. I know my mom would be like, you can't leave the table. And there were 7 of us growing up. So, you can't leave the kitchen table without eating every single thing on your plate. And so that kind of carries on throughout your life, where you're taught to eat, your entire plate at a restaurant, even though over time, portions have gotten bigger and bigger.
Right.
Over the years, but we're still in our mindset is still trained to eat everything on the plate. So just trying to go back to that, hunger fullness scale, staying between that 5 and 7 throughout the day. And if you are at a 7 and you're only halfway done with your plate, knowing that it's okay to, ask for a to-go box and eat it, within the next hour or two. And I think that's one thing with diet culture is, you're ignoring those hunger fullness cues. You're eating until you're sick,
Yeah.
and it kind of triggers a cycle.
Well, and I see a lot of that, of people, in their 50s, like myself, that are holding on to rules that they had when they were 7. One of them being, you need to finish everything on your plate. The 1,200 calorie thing blows my mind now that I think about it. I'm like, why? And I don't even know how you were living off 500. No wonder why we were all miserable. We're starving. And so it's very challenging at times with certain clients to get them to understand you should be eating a minimum of 1,600, and that number floors them. They think that's like a grown 300-pound man should be eating that. And I'm like, sister, do you realize how much movement you do, how much brain function you need? And all of that is because of the food. And so one of the questions I was going to say, the whole fruit basket, we do that too. That was not a thing growing up. And maybe that wasn't other people's houses, but I don't remember ever seeing that. My other question, so I would say it wasn't until about the last 10 years that I've really gotten into fitness, nutrition, health, that I studied and learned about macros. When you first started going to school, was that something they talked about, or do you feel like that has evolved over the past couple of years as we've gotten a little bit smarter, or social media has kind of helped push that out? has there always been macros? And I mean, I know there's always been macros, but have they always talked about macros and we just didn't know about it back in the day? Because I don't remember reading articles in 17 about macros.
So macros is kind of a newer thing that is taught. A lot of sports dietitians use macros as a good foundation to let athletes know what percentage of carbohydrates they should be eating because in fat and protein, because they are building muscle, they need that immediate source of energy. So they need a certain percentage of carbohydrates. For the average person, it's not seen as much unless you're on, for instance, a keto diet. Keto diet, I know, is, they focus a lot on macros because your fat intake should be a lot higher, your carbs should be a lot lower. But for the most part, with calorie counting and, some of these diet products, it's kind of a way for them to make money, is advertising, this is high in protein. But in reality, your body actually gets a lot more protein than you think from just, eating chicken or, eating fish and other protein sources as well. We get a lot more than we think.
And I think a lot of people, I agree with you that the average person, unless they're really seeking that information, they're going to know that macros exist, I think, to a certain degree. They do know that they're supposed to be cutting down on carbs. Most people think carbs are bread and that's it. Like they don't get the whole umbrella. And they know that they should be having protein. So those labels are so misleading for people that don't really understand what it is they should be eating. And so that's where intuitive eating comes in. And so if I'm looking to get away from labels, if I'm looking to get away from saying I'm keto or I'm plant-based or, I'm low carb, whatever it is, and I'm just eating to fuel my body, how do I do that? Where do I start?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And my best advice when I'm working with a client that is kind of used to, they want the magic answer, where do I count the calories? Do I count the macros? And my best advice that I can give anybody is to look up the My Plate method, which is designed by the USDA. And you can kind of get a general idea of what your plate should look like for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it should be well balanced. It should have a good portion of protein, which, you don't have to get out a food scale. You don't have to get out any measuring tool. The best tool is just to, kind of eye it and have it be like maybe the size of the palm of your hand. So that's usually a really good portion. And then balancing it out with vegetables. The majority of your plate should be colorful, should have, a wide variety of vegetables, and then some fruit and carbohydrates. So whether that's brown rice or quinoa, maybe you want a slice of bread, just having a wide variety of all of those food groups is a really good idea or a good foundation to start from.
Yeah.
And having that be your breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Do you know if, because remember when we were growing up, we would have the food triangle. They would give us like a little bit of nutrition stuff in school for health science or whatever. Do you know if they introduced the My Plate in school science, health, education?
So it started off, the USDA started off with a triangle, just so people can kind of get a general idea of what carbohydrates are, protein, and fat, dairy, things like that. But then it got kind of confusing because, that still doesn't get the message across. Like, what should my plate look like? So that's when they transformed the triangle into the My Plate method. And I want to say that was like about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Just so that way people can actually see and visualize what your plate should look like, or just get a general idea of what it should look like.
It really is a good idea because so many people are visual learners, and even if you learn a different way, it's still visually you can see, okay, this is how I should be filling up my plate. And it's funny when we talk about how you should set up your plate and what's the best way so that you don't have that 3 o'clock drop. For people to be like, vegetables at breakfast, or something other than like something quick like a cereal or something, a muffin, or and so that's always a new one for people that aren't used to trying to eat a little bit of everything to really keep that blood sugar level nice and even throughout the day.
Absolutely. And breakfast is kind of an iffy one because who really eats vegetables for breakfast?
Right.
And it's something that I have kind of experimented over the years on, what I can eat for breakfast and still try to get in that serving of vegetables. And I have found that spinach is a great idea. You
Mhm.
can, and I like to cut my spinach so it's nice and small, and I'll add that in with my eggs. And with children, and even adults, if you like cherry tomatoes, that's a great option to throw in there as well.
Oh yeah.
And but part of intuitive eating is, not restricting yourself. So
Right.
if you want to have a muffin for breakfast, feel free to have that muffin and then just try to think to yourself, how can I balance this muffin out? Maybe I'll have a fruit bowl on the side or a smoothie on the side just to try to
Right.
sneak extra fruit and vegetables to help with, getting in those extra nutrients.
Yeah. And that is a good way to be able to say, okay, so you're not going to eat your vegetables for breakfast, but how can you put them in as maybe your mid-morning snack or whatever it is? So when you're meeting with clients, and the really cool thing is when Marissa and I started chatting, we realized that we were literally down the street from each other because there's
Yeah.
so many coaches that I talk to that are in like different states, and like we are like 2 miles away. So if you are in the Round Rock area, she's super close to us, which is really cool. When you are starting to work with some of these women, and they're a little concerned about, am I getting enough? Am I doing it? Am I doing too much? Because especially as they go into menopause, a lot of them will hear, and not all doctors are experts in all fields. And that's really hard for some people to understand. We just assume that they're just brilliant in everything. It's very common that they're not familiar with menopause, and they will give you the general, you just need to eat less, move more. So when you have somebody come to you that's like, I am exercising like crazy, I'm restricting my diet, what is some advice that you tell them?
So, and that's a very good point that you have with doctors not knowing a lot about, women with going through menopause. And in my case, a lot of, doctors actually, and I did a case study back in graduate school where I found that a lot of doctors only took an average of 2 to 3 nutrition courses. And that, that's it. So and I hear this a lot from clients where they'll ask their doctor and the doctor just says, you need to lose weight or you need to stop eating so much.
Right.
And and it's actually, and I hate to say this, but it's the worst advice. You need to eat and you need to fuel your body throughout the day. And if you're exercising a lot, you do need that protein to help repair those muscles and you need to stay hydrated. There's so many things that play a factor, and food, you don't need to eat less. You actually need to eat more, and eat more throughout the day. And it's really good to help regulate those blood sugar levels and to, give you enough energy throughout the day so you can burn more energy as well. So if you're restricting your diet, you don't have enough energy, or a lot of times, you don't have a lot of energy to go on a walk or to go swimming or to go hang out with your kiddos or whatever the case is. You're
Right.
kind of just staying in your own bubble, and you're not going to see those results that you're looking for.
And that's a hard one. It's very hard for people to look at what 1,600 calories looks like, and especially if they're really focusing on, I'm going to eat those fruits and vegetables and I'm going to eat those whole grains. It's really easy to go rack up 1,600 calories at your favorite hamburger place
Absolutely.
versus having these healthy meals, and they feel like they're eating nonstop. But it's because you have been trained to not eat anything. And it's very funny to me that people will be like, well, I'll just eat one big meal. I'll just have that 1,600 calories, at the hamburger place or whatever. And then I've hit my 1,600 calories. And understanding, yes, you have, but how is that fueling your body? Like, how is your body taking it in? How is it going to use those resources that you just provided it? And let's look at it compared to whole foods and real foods and a variety of fruits and vegetables and whole grains. How did your body process that and use that as energy? And so I see a lot of women that are struggling with menopause symptoms. So bloating, you probably get all of this: bloating, skin issues, headaches, brain fog, And then we look at, okay, well, what are you eating? How often are you eating? And, what's the quality of the food that you're eating? And so what can you say?
I'm sorry, you made a great point with, and I see it too a lot where clients will starve themselves, but then they'll eat one big meal and they don't understand why, they still feel sluggish or bloated. And a lot of times we don't realize, especially with food in restaurants or takeout food, how much salt is actually in that food, and not only salt, but calories. And if you are starving yourself, your body is going into that starvation mode essentially, and is going to hold on to the calories and the fat, because it is already trained that it's going to need to hold on to it in order to kind of fuel your body throughout the day, instead of regulating your body and going to the bathroom regularly to get rid of it. It's going to hold on to it.
Yeah. And that's where a lot of that bloating, that inflammation, constipation comes in. It's not pretty, but it is a reality for so many people. And they live in this state of discomfort that once they start to slowly change some of those eating habits, they feel a huge difference. So, when you talk to clients about intuitive eating, you don't really it's not a diet. There's no restrictions. It's really listening to how your body feels. Do you use the words fueling your body? Because I really do think that there's a mindset issue there.
So when I talk about intuitive eating, yes, I do refer to food as fueling your body, because you do need food throughout the day. You even need food when you're getting close to bedtime, because you do burn calories even when you're sleeping. And the main thing with intuitive eating is, rejecting the diet mentality altogether. Listening to your hunger cues instead of ignoring. A lot of diet culture, we tend to ignore our hunger cues. And the big one is like making peace with food. So a lot of times we have, that good food, bad food mentality. And with intuitive eating, it's, being able to accept and making peace with all food, essentially. But yes, back to your question, I do refer to intuitive eating as fueling your body. You do need, I think of it more as like, your car, your vehicle. You need to fill up the tank in order for the car to do what it needs to do, driving around, getting you from point A to point B. And the same thing with us. We fill up essentially, and we utilize those calories or that food to, do our daily function.
Yeah. No, that's a good analogy, because I try to get people to understand that too. And it really does help with keeping you just kind of at that nice even playing field all day long, where you don't have that slope and you don't have that, all of a sudden this sugar rush. Because I have a lot of clients that like to have that, sweet coffee in the middle of the day. And then I'm like, don't you feel like crap at the end of the day? And you're skipping your workouts, or you just want to sit on the couch and veg out. You don't want to make dinner because you don't have the energy. So now you're buying, fast food or whatever. Yeah. So when you have clients come to you and they ask you about, okay, so I need to fuel my body, but I can't eat past 8 o'clock. Like, that's a no. What are your thoughts on that?
Really diving deep and asking them, what is it? Why don't you believe, or why do you believe in not eating past 8 o'clock? Right. And, a lot of times they'll kind of expand on that for their reasons. And some common ones I hear is because, you don't want to gain weight. I hear past 8 o'clock, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to gain weight. Or I've been taught from early on not to eat past 8 o'clock. And it always goes back to that diet culture. And, I don't think a lot of people realize that, you still burn calories when you're sleeping. And for those that do struggle with, maybe sleep apnea, I always do kind of recommend, eating a well-balanced, something light, a well-balanced meal, going back to that hunger fullness cues or scale, stapping when you're at a 5 to a 7, because it does get harder for some to fall asleep if they're extremely full, and, it produces, or they struggle with breathing. So, but in terms of diet culture, I always try to dive deep and listen to like their beliefs and why they think that.
I always tell people, that whatever it is that you're eating, let's say it's 300 calories. it's 300 calories at 8:01. It's 300 calories at 7:30. Like there's no difference here. That clock isn't changing anything. And I think because most people like to weigh themselves first thing in the morning, well, yes, you ate later, so it's still sitting there. You just haven't had the time to expel what you needed to do. So of course it's going to look like you gained a little bit because you ate a little bit later, but we have those conversations as well.
And that's one thing too with, oh, sorry, again, that's one thing with intuitive eating is, not having to weigh yourself, take weight off the table,
Yeah.
if, diet culture has not worked for you in the last 30, 40 years, try switching to a different approach. And, I can't even remember the last time I weighed myself because to me it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
And it's more about how you feel inside your body, how you're sleeping at night, how much energy you have throughout the day. And, kind of going back to the, restricting yourself, not eating before going to bed. I see a lot of times with eating disorders, clients will, not eat past, I've even seen 4 or 5 o'clock and, they go to bed hungry.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they wake up in the middle of the night and, they go and they eat everything in the refrigerator
Right.
or dream about food, or they're waking up and they're starving. And it's hard seeing that, but
I will admit I do dream about food. Okay, one last question before we kind of wrap it up, and we'll get into a couple more things before we close it out. But I do get a lot of questions about intermittent fasting, especially for women, over 50, and apparently, for some that is the secret sauce. My view is, like you said, when we're sleeping, we're not eating. I feel like I'm fasting at that point, and then I wake up, I break the fast. If I stopped eating dinner, or stopped snacking by 7 p.m. and I don't eat breakfast till 8 a.m., I've already fasted 12 hours right there. A lot of people don't recognize that as fasting. What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting? Because if we're trying to fuel our body with, let's say, 1,600 calories or more, and I'm only giving myself 5 hours to do it.
Absolutely.
Is it possible to do it and do it well, or is it something you feel like maybe it's not the best solution?
And with intermittent fasting, it's such an iffy topic because it's very individualized. So if you're somebody that struggles with an eating disorder, with like binge eating or restrictive dieting, I don't really recommend intermittent fasting because, maybe you're burning more calories than, the person that's doing it, or you don't have the appetite that, and a hormone imbalance that, somebody may not have, where you do require more food. And, with intermittent fasting, I will admit I've tried it in my past with, diet culture, and I just was not the perfect candidate for it. I couldn't go 12 to 15 hours without eating. I have seen a lot of studies where it does regulate your blood sugar levels for some. And, but then I've seen sometimes with people that struggle with like diabetes, where it drops their blood sugar levels too low. So it kind of just depends on the person.
I think that, I 100% agree that it really is an individual thing, and it depends on how you're fueling your body in that window, and what you're fueling it with and all. So we could talk about this forever because, like I said, growing up, I was always dieting, or something to do with food being a positive or a negative in my life was always front and center. And so it's something that I see in my own self, and I want to make sure that I don't pass that on to my daughters specifically, but all of my kids, my son as well. And so it is something that I'm aware of, that we try not to label anything. We just eat. We eat because sometimes we eat out of joy. Sometimes we eat because our body needs that fuel. We're going to go for a run, or we're going to go for a bike ride or whatever. And so I want them to realize that there's a lot that goes into fueling your body, and it really is about feeling good. And so exactly what you said, how do you feel? How is your energy level? Do you feel, not bloated? Is your hair shiny? Does your skin look great? Look at those things, and that's going to tell you that what you're doing is working.
Absolutely. And
number
don't
on
put
the
a time
scale.
frame on it too. Like,
Oh,
don't
that's
give yourself
good.
a month or 2 months to
Yeah,
be your goal. Just, kind of, it's hard to explain to, when you're in that diet culture or loop, just, put it aside and,
yeah.
put everything else in the forefront.
We do use, trust the process a lot. And that is a hard thing. You're right. It's just letting it happen naturally. And I know for my personal journey into this perimenopause, menopause life that have going on, and I've shared it 100 times. I've gained 30 pounds it's now been about 4.5 years. And I have not lost the 30 pounds, but I have to tell you, I feel amazing. And
Good.
so, yes, I'm not wearing the same pants I was 4 years ago. And, sometimes that's frustrating, but I have to get out of that. But physically, I'm like, I have more energy than I have had. My hair is better. I don't have, issues in the bathroom. I feel amazing. And so I have to keep reminding myself that. And that's a hard thing because that was not in the magazines when we read them,
Oh, no.
So,
What was in the magazines were very thin women that were most likely malnourished.
yeah,
And, it's so much more important, like you had mentioned, all those things, how you feel is so much more important, and not comparing yourselves to. And I think as women, that's, one thing that it's just always on social media, and it's, walking around, seeing very thin women, we tend to compare ourselves a
right.
lot. But just kind of coming and, making peace with your body and
Yeah.
knowing that it's, we're all different and we're all built different. And what's most important is just how you feel overall.
Right. I've decided that as long as the old hubs is enjoying the extra, then I'll enjoy it as well.
Yes, yes, I love it.
Have to let it go. Okay, so Merisa, I appreciate you coming on. Where can we find you? If I have more questions about intuitive eating, you've got a website?
I do. So you can find me at liveNourished.today.com. So that's live and then nourished, NOURISHED, and then today.com.
Okay.
I have my phone number on there as well that you
Okay.
can reach me. You can text me as well with that phone number.
Okay.
And I have my email. So if you want to email me instead, it's Marissa@liveNourished.today.com.
Okay. And then are you on Instagram as well?
I am, yes.
Okay.
And just
Okay.
search Live Nourished Today. You should be able
Okay.
to find it.
And I will share all the links with this video so they can find you. And do you have any free resources on your website that if they were like, I would like to know a little bit more about intuitive eating, do you have anything that kind of shows them an overview?
Oh, absolutely. So
Okay.
just on my homepage, I have lots of information
Oh,
about
good.
intuitive eating, common eating disorders that I see a lot of education material on there.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So I will share all that, and then that way they can download it and get it for themselves. Oh,
Okay,
that's awesome.
great.
Thank you so much.
Of
And
course.
I'm
Thank you for
sure I'm
having me.
going to have a ton of questions about, intuitive eating and diet culture and, some more things to talk about. So I will definitely reach out. And since we're like 2 miles away,
Yes.
I can just jog on over there.
Come on over.
I know. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I will be back soon with another special guest. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but we've got some great topics coming up. All right, guys, have a great one.
Bye-bye.